And the recording has started, Chair.
Okay, good morning everybody and welcome to this meeting of the Swansea Bay Corporate Joint Committee. We'll go first to apologies for absence, please. I know I've received apologies from Jan Williams as Chair of the Swansea Bay University Health Board. Have we had any other apologies for today, please?
We have received apologies also from Will Bramble, Chief Executive of Pembrokeshire Council, Chris Moore, Finance Officer, and Tegrin Jones as well from the National Park Authority.
Okay,
and I believe
thank you.
Dr. Madeline Harvard has got her hand up.
Madeline, like to come in?
Thank you, Chloe. Diolch Cadeirydd. No, it was just in case Tegrin, just to make you aware that Tegrin isn't able to join, but he'd obviously very efficiently sent his apologies. Diolch.
Okay, thank you. We'll move then to declarations of interest. Are there any interests that members wish to declare for any items on the agenda today? No? Okay. Move then to the minutes of the previous meeting, pages 5 to 12 of your agenda. I've not had any requests for any amendments, but happy to take any amendments members may have today. If there aren't any, I'm happy to move them as a true record. Could I ask for a seconder, please?
Happy to second, Chair.
Thank you, John. It's been moved and seconded. All happy to agree the minutes? Okay, thank you very much. Those are agreed. We'll move on then. Before I do, please can I welcome Mark John to the meeting. Apologies, Mark. I meant to welcome you at the beginning. So welcome, Mark's here as the new Private Sector Advisory Board Chair. So Mark, welcome. Look forward to working very closely with you. And with that, we'll move to the report that covers that item, which is appointment of Chair of the Private Sector Advisory Board, PASB, pages 13 to 16 of your agenda. Craig, I'll hand over to you, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. So just as you mentioned there, at its meeting earlier this week, the Private Sector Advisory Board confirms to Mark John as Chair of their group. So we previously agreed in the constitution of the CJC that the Chair of the PSAB will be co-opted in a non-voting capacity to the main CJC itself. Hence the reason Mark now was here today in his first official meeting as a not co-opted member. So just before you today for information purposes, Chair.
Apologies, just hear my mic off. Thank you, Craig, for that. So could I ask the leaders to show if they're in agreement, please, with the recommendations of the report? Thank you very much. That is agreed. So Mark, welcome. I don't know if there's anything you'd like to say at this point. Welcome. You're more than welcome to do so.
You know me, Rob. I've always got a few things to say. Yeah, no, delighted to be able to take up this appointment. I joined the Private Sector Advisory Board some months ago and very keen to help promote the growth of the economy of South West Wales, particularly the digital economy and technology, which is the sector I come from. So for people who don't know me, I'm from Tramshire Tech Innovation Hubs Network, with a great iconic site in Palace Theatre in Swansea, but also working with some of the other authorities in the CJC to help stimulate that growth. So delighted to have the support of the board as their chair, and had a really constructive meeting on Monday this week. So looking forward to taking that forward.
Okay, thank you, Mark, and welcome. With that then, colleagues, we'll move on to item 5, which is the South West Wales Corporate Joint Committee Chief Executive Review, and that's on pages 17 to 24 of your agenda. And if I can welcome Wendy to take us through this one, please. Wendy.
Lovely, diolch. Thank you, Chair. So the report before members today is to seek the determination from yourselves, the South West Wales Corporate Joint Committee, as to the future role of the officer currently designated as Chief Executive Officer. The report presents 3 options for members to consider of how that role may look moving forward, and what that means in terms of statutory function for the region. So members will be aware that the role and duties of that post have significantly changed over the last few years since the inception of the Corporate Joint Committee governance structures. it's become increasingly evident that more responsibilities are beginning to be devolved from Welsh Government to the regions across Wales, and the enhanced decision-making powers that members will currently have, and potentially may have further down the road in terms of the next few years. So on that basis, I felt that it was appropriate that the position was just updated, the options were presented to members as to what that resource and capacity may look like moving forward. And also it gives you an outline of how the other CJCs are adopting the approach across Wales. So I'll leave it there, Chair, for members to discuss, and accordingly whether the delegation then is given to myself and colleagues to move and implement suggested proposals forward. Diolch yn fawr, thank you.
Thank you, Wendy. And look, can I start by acknowledging the work that you have done and that the chief executives do across the region. It's a great support to me, but as you said, the role has grown significantly in recent years. CJCs are a major structure now within the Welsh local government and regional setups. In terms of where we go, you've got those three options, as you say, which is to look at the appointment of a permanent chief operating officer or a chief officer, to second a chief officer, or to continue with the status quo. And I think, as you've outlined and as the report says, the pressures on our chief executives at the moment are such that I don't think option 3, from my position as chair, is a sensible one. And that for me leaves us with 2. And I think if we're going to appoint a chief officer, that we do so for a permanent chief officer and test the market to find the best candidate we can to take on the work of the CJC. I know there are different varying views across Wales in how they do this, and I know obviously CJCs have the opportunity to go slower or faster within the agreements that we have with Welsh Government, but I know we are ambitious for our region and we want the best for our region. And I think that for us means that, for me anyway, I would like to see us appoint. We've of course got the spectre of Welsh Government elections coming, and the next Welsh Government, whatever makeup that government is, may decide to review this. But that, given that it's in legislation, may take some time to do anyway, even if the Welsh Government, the next Welsh Government, decides to do that. And I think for us, that means that we've got to make the best decision we can today, which doesn't mean that we potentially will make the perfect decision, but we make the best decision we can today. And so for me, my view would be that we look at option 1, but happy obviously to take views from members and colleagues as to how they would like to proceed. So I'll open it up. I'll go to Councillor Hunt next. Steve?
Yeah, thanks, Rob. I agree with everything you've said there. Option 1 is the best option for us to look at today. Just a quick question again. We know our chief executives, so we have to move away from that sharing role. They haven't got enough time in the day to do their jobs in their local authorities currently. Things aren't getting any easier, getting a lot tougher. And I know in pre-briefing and conversations with regards how Senedd may look. And Craig's on the call. I just wondered, something I forgot to mention in the pre-briefing was that built into it, Wendy explained it quite eloquently, and the mechanisms, and we won't know where we will be after the Senedd elections. But it is a very responsible role. But I just wondered that if it changes within Welsh Government's perspective going forward, because we know currently CJCs is a tool that they'd like to invest in to make the regions more equipped to do the work that we're all here to do. I just wondered, is there any sort of safeguarding where things change that we build into the contract when it's being designed for this particular role? I forgot to ask that, so I thought I'd ask it in the full meeting, because things might change a bit. If you're stuck within a particular contract, then you'd have to wait till the conclusion of that contract before you relook at it. So I just wondered if something hypothetically completely changes within after the elections, would we have a mechanism or some sort of tools to address that role for the right reasons then? That's all I wanted to ask. Thank you.
Yeah, Steve, thanks for that. I'll pass that on to Wendy and Craig for views. I guess, Steve, from my position, I think a couple of things to think about. Obviously, employment law would apply, and if we do end up going for a permanent chief executive, then those safeguards of employment would kick in at the appropriate times. You could obviously consider not doing a permanent chief executive, but you may still over time be caught by the same employment regulations, and anyway, you may then diminish the amount of people interested in the role if they don't think it's a permanent long-term role. So there are swings and roundabouts, I guess, in terms of how you achieve that. But I'll pass it back to Wendy and Craig for the technical answer on it.
Again, I'll leave Craig bring in the legal side of it, but it's just as you say, Chair, employment law would kick in, Steve, and probably at the point of whether there would be a review. If there would be a review, then I think the same obligations would apply of us as an employing body, as opposed to whether we had a fixed term contract of 12 months or 2 years. But as the Chair has just stated, I think the interest in the role would be slightly less if we made it a short-term contract. Craig, I don't know if you want to add.
No, I think you yourself, Chair, and Wendy, you've covered all the essentials there from an employment law perspective. If you were making a permanent appointment, you wouldn't be able to sort of say that if there was subject to something changing in the CJC world, then the contract would fall by the wayside. We'd have to deal with it then in line with the usual employment law processes. They would have entitlement to certain rights. So you wouldn't be able to safeguard it if you were to make a permanent appointment. The only alternative would be to do something on a temporary basis in that sense to future-proof it. But it can be dealt with in line with all employment law processes, and we would make sure that it also falls in line with Carmarthenshire employment processes as well, obviously, as what would be the host authority.
Okay, Steve. John?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. If you've moved option one, I'm happy to second option one, because I think a permanent appointment is probably the right thing to do. All our chief executives, our respective chief executives, are very, very busy, as we all know, and obviously this sort of revolving chair, whilst it's worked in the past, I think going forward we need to get a more permanent approach going forward. We've seen the sort of regional transport, if you like, being offloaded by Welsh Government to the CJCs, which I'm supportive of. So there's more work there, and the likelihood there may be more work going forward. Totally take Steve's point about, Senate elections and what may happen, fully accept that, but there's an element of crystal ball gazing there, isn't there? And I think we just need to push on with this permanent appointment now, let Wendy obviously sort it out through the recruitment process, and see what happens in a couple of years' time. So happy to support. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, thank you very much, John. Appreciate that. Are there any other colleagues who wish to make any comments or wish to say anything on this item? Option one has been moved and seconded. So if there aren't any other comments, then could I ask leader colleagues if they are in favour of option one? Thank you very much. That is agreed. Thank you, colleagues. So we'll proceed on that basis then. We'll move now then to item 6, which is the South West Wales Corporate Joint Committee pre-audit annual return for 24-25. I think Aldred is going to present this one for us.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Good morning, everyone. So the report starts on page 25 of the report pack. So this report details the pre-audit annual return for the year end in 24-25, and it was presented to the Overview and Scrutiny Committee on the 2nd of July. I'd just like to add, since producing this report, the annual return has been audited by internal audit this week and no issues were reported. I'd just like to express my thanks to Matt Holder from Pembrokeshire Council for his speedy turnaround of the audit. Currently, Audit Wales are also undertaking their audit of the annual return. And according to the terms of reference of the Governance and Audit Subcommittee, that committee will receive the post-audit annual return on the 31st of July for sign-off. So as you can see, sorry, there are two elements to the report. The Appendix A shows the outturn for the year, and Appendix B, the annual return, which summarises the outturn into the required format. So I'd like to draw your attention to the outturn on Appendix A, and that's on page 31, I believe. So as you're aware, on the 23rd of July 2024, the Joint Committee approved the 24-25 budget, which was set at 615,000, with a levy from each of the constituent authorities, and this was reduced by 10% through the utilisation of reserves, leaving 556,000 to raise through the levy. The Joint Committee also received a Welsh Government grant of 100,000 for the Transport Subcommittee. So as you can see, the outturn shows a total underspend of 332,000, with the balance of this being transferred to the CJC reserves. So to make up this 332,000, there were some variances. So the accountable body was overspent by 2,000, and this is a minor amount, but it was due to external audit fees incorporating a performance audit within their scope. Support services were underspent by 47,000. We have a vacant post for a senior accountant. This has been vacant for some time due to level activity of the CJC. I'm covering the workload. More significantly, the subcommittees, they were underspent by £220,000 due to no activity being incurred across all 4 subcommittees, as well as the planning and programme management line. And then finally, the Regional Management Office was underspent by 73,000. There was no expenditure against the consultancy and specialist advisor pots, as well as printing, translation and ICT equipment not being utilised, and budgets not being utilised, sorry. So as we can see at the bottom of the appendix, incorporated and brought forward balance from the previous years of 843,000, adding the interest earned on the balance during the year of 55,000, we are now left with a reserve of 1.176 million. I'll pause here to see if there's any questions before I move on to the actual annual return. No.
Okay, thank you, Aldred. Are there any questions or comments for Aldred? Steve?
Yeah, just one very quick one, Stephen, and I don't want to give you extra work, but you mentioned that vacant post that you've been covering. Within your own capacity. I just wondered, I'm glad Craig's here anyway, legally, but while we're all trying to save a little bit of money, you know, local authorities, the CJCs and wherever, is it a struggle then? Sorry, it's straightforward question to you. I'm just wondering whether that post potentially does need to be filled, and maybe there could be an increase in a salary to you that's not the full complement of that post, where if you have got the capacity to continue within that role or not. Sure. So it's a straightforward question, really. Okay. It's just I'm always looking to try and save a bit of money wherever we can, but thank you.
Okay, thanks. So currently I am split 80% to the city deal and 20% to the CJC. But as maybe the CJ and the city deal progresses into its next stage, and that probably ties into the Agenda 8 future of the POMO, then maybe more of my costs or salary would be shifted towards the CJC work as that increases. So I think, yeah, we'll see how the outcome of the future of the POMO turns out, and then take it from there. But there is budget there for a senior accountant post, so I could utilize more of that to cover my costs.
Thank you for that, Craig.
Yeah, I think just as a follow-up to that, Councillor Hunt, as well, that obviously the previous report that you've just taken is in respect of a chief executive appointment ultimately being progressed. One of those things a chief executive or chief operating officer will look at is the structure needed ultimately as part of future works, and that will be subject to future reports. I've got no doubt ultimately back to you collectively as a CJC. So I think those sort of issues of capacity will clearly be picked up at that point as well.
Thanks, Craig. Okay, any other comments, questions for Aldred? If not, I'll come back to you then to take the final part of the report.
Thanks. So the actual annual return is on Appendix B, and that's page 33. So for joint committees with income and expenditure below 2.5 million per year, and we are well below that at the moment, the requirement is that accounts are prepared in the form of an annual return. So this annual return is split into 4 sections. First, we have the accounting statement. Then we have an annual governance statement, then there's the certification, and then finally the internal audit annual report. So the accounting statement, so this categorises the income and expenditure of the CJC and includes a brought forward balance from the previous year. So we have currently, well, for 24-25, the expenditure of the CJC was 378,000. And as I mentioned, we raised levies of 556,000, plus the Welsh Government grant, 100,000, and the interest earned, 55,000, gave us a total income of circa 710,000. So as I said, is well below the current limit of 2.5 million. So I'll quickly run through the actual return and the statement of balances, just to give you a bit more explanation of the actual figures included. So you can see in point 8 debtors, we have debtors of 84,500. So this relates to the Welsh Government £100,000 RTP grant. So in the year we received 15,500. So we had a debtor of 84,500 to come in. So that's why it's included in the accounts. But I can confirm that we have received that 84,500 income in 25-26. And then creditors in point 10, this ties up to the Welsh Government grant. So the creditors are 117,000, but of this, 100,000 relates to the reimbursement of this £100,000 expenditure to Swansea Council. Swansea Council leading on the RTP, Regional Transport Plan. They've incurred the £100,000 expenditure, so now we need to pay that over to them. Because we didn't receive the all £100,000 grant within the year, we couldn't make that payment. We have now received that payment, so we have Welsh Government grant interest income, so we have made that payment since to Swansea Council. Then there's a small element of invoices outstanding, including the external audit fees. Point 11 obviously summarises all the above, give us the carried forward balance of 1.176 million. Moving on to the annual governance statement on page 34. So this provides a CJC's response to the governance of the committee and is very similar to the previous year's response. So in here we acknowledge that we have effective financial management with systems of control and fraud prevention. Finally then is the annual internal audit report. As I said earlier, internal audit that's provided through an SLA with Pembrokeshire County Council. They have now completed their audit. There's no issues arising, but this report was produced before that audit was finalised. But that section has been now completed and will be given to the Governance and Audit Committee for their scrutiny or approval. So thank you very much, Chair. I'm open for any questions.
Thank you, Aldred. And any further questions or comments for Aldred? If not, colleagues, then thank you for that, Aldred. The recommendations for decision are on page 25 of the agenda pack. I'm happy to move them as a true rec, and I'd look to leader colleagues for a seconder. Thank you, John. And therefore, could I ask leader colleagues to show if they're in agreement with the audit reports, please? Thank you very much. Those are agreed. Thank you for that again, Aldred. We'll move then to item 7, which is the South West Wales Regional Transport Plan, and this is on pages 37 to 48 of the agenda. I just wanted to highlight, apologies, I just want to highlight, sorry, there's getting a bit of feedback there. Thank you, colleagues. Just want to highlight that the appendices 10 and 11 in relation to this report are exempt under paragraph 14. So if there are any questions or comments on those paragraphs, then those will need to be discussed in private session. But the aim will be for us to discuss as much as possible in public session. So again, just to highlight to members, if there is something specific in those appendices, then if you can indicate, and we will need to then discuss them in private session. Other than that, we can obviously proceed. So if I could ask, I believe Mark Wade and Stuart Davis, I think, are here with us, as is Lee, to introduce the report.
Thank you, Chair. Diolch yn fawr iawn. I'll give a brief introduction overview, and then I'll bring in Lee just to cover some of the policy elements, and then I'll cover the regional transport delivery plan that's included as part of that. So there's 4 things in the recommendations. The first, in terms of to note the progress in terms of where we've got to for the regional transport plan. to approve the final regional transport plan and the supporting documents for submission to Welsh Government. To note the Welsh Government's latest sort of position on grant funding and the, I guess, the process which is underway in terms of the grants modernisation. And the final one is the note the requirement for the additional staff resources that will be delivered by the Chief Executive under delegated powers. What I'll do, I'll bring Lee in just to cover where, I guess, where we've got to from the last time we presented the draft to the CJC, and just to give an overview of where we've got to on that, and then I'll come back in on the delivery plan. So, Lee, if I could hand over to you, thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Stuart, and good morning, Chair. Good morning, members. Firstly, I think just an observation, if I may. This has been a team sport to get to this stage, so I think the officers would like to obviously thank the support we've received from this committee, the other committees of the CJC, the individual cabinets of the authorities, and indeed also the stakeholders around the region. It is a team sport. Lot of work have gone into this. So I think, Chair, just to note that first of all, good observation. I think clearly we've gone through the usual process of CJC meetings to reach this point. We met with Transport Subcommittee and the Scrutiny Committee last week. All positive, I think, from that. Some detailed comments, as you expect. Just in terms then of taking this forward from here on in, obviously subject to the debate and discussion and voting today, we are looking to submit the regional transport plan to the Welsh Government on the 25th of July. Clearly, officials will then consider that over the summer. We are expecting feedback quite soon, but also we believe, we're led to believe, formal announcements on funding for next year will start to come through from October onwards. So that's the indicative programme, and we expect that October deadline is when the RTP is likely to be endorsed by the Welsh Government ministers. Ready in advance of that discussion about starting the actual delivery in April next year. Just in terms of the report, Chair, I'll touch on a few key items, and then I'll hand back to Stuart to discuss probably the most topical issue that's still live at the moment, which is around delivery and funding and scheme identification and such. We held some public consultation, as you know, that was approved by this committee earlier this year. We did really well there. We got over 900 responses, so we feel that's a balanced response and quite an informative response. Some headlines coming out of that, I think we'd probably canvassed this before, but certainly some concern about the level of active travel that was proposed in the plan. Obviously, we've had to follow Welsh Government guidance in that respect. Certainly some concern raised about that. And also a lot of commentary about the capability and capacity of the bus, and to some extent the rail network as well. But certainly bus, I think, is becoming a live issue. We know that's a moving feast at the moment, with bus franchising on the horizon and the various legislation that's in play. We did our normal round of stakeholder engagement, so that was positive again. Detailed comments from a whole raft of stakeholders across the region, and we also did some form of statutory consultation with the bodies that are involved in some of those formal assessments that we need to conduct of a plan of this nature. Those statutory assessments, as I say, were conducted. We reached out to Natural Resources Wales and Cadw, as we were obliged to, and I'm pleased to say both of those organisations came back with a clean bill of health. Just to note, Chair, as well, that the statutory assessments does include CJC's integrated impact assessment, as well as strategic environmental assessment and habitats regulation assessment. So a lot of work there in the background that's took place, all vital for us to move forward on that approval basis, that we've done all the correct checks and balances have been put in place. And we did have advice from Craig about that as we went along. We now have a monitoring and evaluation plan. Clearly, we're going to put forward a programme of works that's in the various appendices. Clearly, one thing that is needed is to monitor and evaluate that. So there is a plan now included within the RTP. It's as one of the appendices that you'll see in the reports pack. One important change we've made, Chair, is to move the schemes that were rail and trunk road schemes, so those national schemes. And obviously, I know this is quite a topical issue, but those have now been moved from our delivery plan into the main text of the RTP. Obviously, it's not something we can deliver directly, those trunk road and rail schemes. So they best, on those government advice, sit within the plan and the words and strategy rather than within the delivery element of the plan. Obviously, we've updated the words, the policy framework that's in the documents that you see before you today. These reflect changes, for instance, such as the latest position on bus franchising. There are a number of other minor changes as well, Chair, that you will have seen if you when you look at the documents in detail. But I think it's been a process of evolution, not revolution. There's certainly no new left field policies in there. It's very much what you saw before. I think that's about everything I've got to say just about the process, Chair. I know you've had the briefings. Stuart, I think you're now going to comment on the delivery plan and the funding side as well.
Yeah, thanks, Lee. Thank you. Yeah, just to give a brief overview where we've got to on the delivery plan. Just as a reminder, we started, I guess, with a long list in terms of on then carried out an initial sort of screening process. Went through as part of the different stages of the consultation to review the kind of schemes and programmes which were considered sort of important across the communities and across the regions for that. We then developed and agreed a kind of matrix scoring approach which looked at all the various factors for determining the transport need. And that came up with a certain ranking. We then carried out a further prioritisation exercise which involves sort of representations from the authorities, the sort of needs from each of the local authorities in the region to try and give a closer idea of I guess a fair distribution in terms of the schemes across the region, schemes and programmes. And then we split the two up into two separate lists, one being the sort of delivery list and one being the development list. So at this stage, the ones being put forward from a delivery perspective were the ones which were top to be taken forward. The delivery list was sort of future items and things which could be further work could be carried out, and they may move between either as the programme develops over the 5-year intended period, and I guess works beyond that. So we ended up with a total list of somewhere in the region of 190 schemes, just below 190, with being just under 90 in the delivery list. In terms of the guidelines which were issued during this process from Welsh Government, we had an indicative sort of funding allocation, or a guideline to work to, which was in the region of 1.5 times, or to try and work a programme to 1.5 times the previous spend, which gave somewhere just below about sort of 40 million, 30 million, 38 million to 40 million a year. What we've actually got in here exceeds that amount. We're somewhere in the region of about 47 million for year one, but that includes a number of major schemes, and it's quite an important factor, really, the major schemes. We've had initial discussions with the Welsh Government about how major schemes are dealt with. We've got four major schemes identified across the region at the moment. And the challenge is that they would have potentially up to, well, over 100 million of expenditure on those four, against the total potential settlement of somewhere in less than 200 million. So it's a really significant amount. So I think that's ongoing discussions that will need to be had at a senior level in terms of how those major schemes are dealt with, because there certainly is talk of nationally significant schemes potentially attracting a separate funding pot, and obviously funding those through, if those settlement amounts would put a significant amount of strain on the programme. But I suppose coming to it, we have got some over programming compared to where we are. There will be a need to refine this down and do a lot of work between now and October, to work up a detailed sort of year one list, and that's sort of arrangements for those discussions and meetings with Welsh Government and Transport for Wales and officers are underway now. But you know, we have over-programmed. I think there's a level of stating the ambition. We've got somewhere in the region of about £500 million worth of asks in here, but we know that the you know, certainly with the current indications is that the funding won't come, you know, close to that, and that's where we will have to work on that sort of reducing that down and coming up with some of the key transport priorities for year one delivery and on from there. So I think they were the main things I wanted to flag up, Chair. So thank you very much. Happy to take any questions.
Yeah, thank you, Stuart, and thank you, Lee, for that run through. And can I add my thanks to the work that's been done? I know it's been really challenging given the lack of clarity we have from Welsh Government on how the funding will actually play out. And as you say, Stuart, you know, we've attempted to demonstrate our ambition here on the basis we want to do more, but we obviously don't have all of the answers that we would have liked in terms of the clarity of funding at this point in time. So we've had to make our best endeavours to create that plan. If I pause there for a moment, just to go to Councillor Price. Darren, I don't know, obviously you've chaired the Transport Committee and wondered if anything you wish to add at this point?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Thanks, Rob. As I say, I've chaired the subcommittee over a period of time now, and just want to put on record my thanks for the huge amount of work that officers have put in to get us to this point. It really has been a mammoth task. And as you say, we've got to a situation where we've managed to prioritise a list of schemes here for the next for a period in a world of huge uncertainty, and I think it's really important that we note that. So thanks to everyone for their efforts. As you mentioned, Rob, we did meet as a subcommittee. We've met on a number of occasions, but on the last occasion where we discussed this very report, I'll just try and summarize maybe some of the feedback that came through. So the uncertainty around the grant funding is a real concern for us and a real issue for us. I know that negotiations and discussions are happening between officers at local authority level through the CJC and Welsh Government officials. But what is absolutely clear is that there is still uncertainty. We don't know what the answer is, for example, in terms of what schemes will be funded nationally and what level of funding will be properly fully devolved into the CJCs to implement here. I think, as Stuart mentioned, our level of ambition for the region is significant, and it far exceeds really the sort of suggested funding envelope that we've got on the table at the moment. So we certainly need more clarity around that over the next few months. I think that one of the conversations we've been having is that there is a risk to us here in South West Wales. We know that the Burns Commission in South East, for example, there's a very strong lobby in the north of Wales in terms of transport investment there. So we need to ensure that we have a fair slice of the cake when it comes to investment in South West Wales. And that goes on, that works on a number of different levels as well. So yes, the focus here is around our road infrastructure and what we can control. But as Lee mentioned, we do recognise that there are some significant transport interventions and investments that we need in South West Wales that are currently outside of our control. So the trunk road is a clear one, and obviously rail investment is another, where we have got pretty significant and far-reaching objectives. But we need that national support at both Welsh Government and UK Government level to deliver against those. In the last subcommittee meeting, we did discuss the limitations that currently exist within the Welsh Government Capital Programme, and that, of course, flows from the consequences that they receive from the UK Government. It was disappointment that the Welsh Government haven't received the consequentials in full, for example, from the HS2 and the well-documented now Oxford-Cambridge line, which bizarrely have been classified as England and Wales projects, but the last time I looked, neither Cambridge or Oxford were very close to Wales. So there are some political issues here that we need to work through clearly to ensure that the Welsh Government have got as big a pot as possible to deliver within Wales. I think that the issue of fair funding then applies at two different levels. I think there's a piece of work for us to do. To be fair to officers within the region, they're in constant dialogue with Welsh Government officials in terms of the grants modernisation programme, trying to see clarity in terms of what schemes are going to be funded nationally and what will be delivered locally. But I do think that there's possibly a need for us to lobby on a political level as well over the next few months, because I think that we're talking here of hopefully getting clarification by October from Welsh Government in terms of next year's transport settlement. I think we've got a pretty small window now, really, in terms of feeding in maybe some of the points and the concerns that we have locally to Welsh Government. And I'd be happy to obviously discuss with leaders across the region here how best we do that over the next few months. I do think it's important that we will speak as a united voice. It was noted, disappointingly, that just on the rail, for example, following the comprehensive spending review announcement, there wasn't a single project announced in South West Wales, and that is something that we cannot let happen in future. We've got to ensure that our needs on transport are fully reflected and fully understood, really, at both Welsh Government and UK Government level. But again, that is something we can discuss outside of this committee, and I'm sure we'd find a form of words where we can do that. But I think the other point I wanted to pick up on, you'll see from the report here that even though the grants modernisation work is ongoing and those discussions are happening, there is a suggestion here that there'd still be a monitoring element for Welsh Government, so we'd still have these admin costs at a CJC level, which personally I feel are unnecessary. I think that if the purpose of the CJC, as we discussed earlier, Chair, in terms of the format, or we will discuss rather, in terms of the future format of the CJC and in terms of staffing levels, if we can cut down on the amount of bureaucracy and administrative returns that we have to supply to Cardiff Bay, that will greatly reduce our costs. And I think this is one such area that Welsh Government could potentially fully devolve the funding and trust the regional structures to deliver on what we deem to be our priorities. That is true devolution and that is true regional working. So yeah, those are the kinds of issues that have come through from our discussions as a subcommittee. But generally, Chair, I really want to place on record my thanks to all those officers across the 4 local authorities and Lee as well, who have done a fantastic job to get us to this point. Diolch yn fawr.
Yeah, thank you, Darren. Absolutely agree with your comments there. And obviously reinforce on behalf of the CJC the thanks to the officers for the immense amount of work that's been undertaken. Just a couple of points I'd like to come in on the back of what you said and support. I think in terms of the comprehensive spending review, it's good to see Wales getting some rail investment where it's been completely missing for many years, but it needs to be more evenly spread. And the fact that all of the schemes are focused in the southeast or the north of Wales is simply unacceptable. I've been clear with colleagues on that. We have to continue to lobby, and Mark is with us today. I hope the Public Sector Advisory Board will pick up that mantle as well. I know you've got Mark Barry there. We have to continue to put our case, because if you look at Transport for Wales' own data, then the most impactful routes that can be delivered in rail to move people out of their cars and on to public transport are the ones in our region. So if that data says that, why isn't the funding following the science? That's the question here. So we need to put that case. Secondly, on bus franchise, again, colleagues will have had briefings from Transport for Wales in terms of the bus franchising process and the consultation. Again, made clear to Transport for Wales, they're going for a base position and inviting comments into that from residents. I hope all residents and councils and partners take the opportunity to feed in their views as to what the bus network needs to look like, because it cannot be a publicly organised bus network that looks exactly like the private sector network we've got now, because the private sector network doesn't fulfill the needs of residents. So I'm not looking as a local authority leader to take over responsibility for a network that looks exactly the same and does the poor service that the current networks do. So we have to be more ambitious, we have to be more aspirational, and I hope that we will all make those comments back to Transport for Wales, because if we are to take on franchising from 2027 as the first region, it's upon us to get it right, and that means making sure that we take out the issues that we've got in the current network. So absolutely agree and are up for that. One thing I would say, just a couple of clarifications. It's been made clear to me that the announcement of extra investment in the southeastern north at the present time is not the totality of the investment, and I think we have to hold both governments to that, because the very next announcements I would hope are in our region, and we should be definitely going after that in terms of rail. And in terms of rail designation, I think this is one that's been a bit of an idiosyncrasy, really. My understanding is it's a treasury pot, if you like, for investment in rail, which classes England and Wales together. Unhelpful for the people of Wales to see, as Councillor Price said, as Darren said, an Oxford line being classed as an England and Wales scheme when it's hundreds of miles away from Wales. It's the same issue that HS2 had. The point being here, I said, if we're to change that and to have separate pots, or if the government decides to go further and look for devolution of rail into Wales and for that to become a responsibility, again, don't know whether that is sensible to do or the right thing to do. If it is, then it has to come, I would suggest, with a healthy amount of money, because we know the rail network in Wales has been underinvested for far too long. So, if we are to go into a position where there is a separate investment for Wales and an evolved rail network, then it has to come with a healthy amount of investment alongside it to recompense for the lack of investment over many, many years. So again, fully agree with Darren's comments and have, as chair, already continued the lobbying post CSR announcements. And I welcome all colleagues who are prepared to lobby both governments for more investment in our region, because we really need it. Okay, I'll go to Steve next, Councillor Hunt.
Thanks, Rob. I am conscious of the time, so I think you and Darren have summed it up between you completely. It's just I wanted to, with Lee on the call as well, and I know what I said about the time. You got train and bus, and it's great to see South West Wales being the first franchise rollout. It's just that how prioritising, you're right, Transport for Wales have been down to see all leaders, so that was a great piece of work, so that they could reflect the some of the areas that they know better and how that's going to look. But I just wondered then, because you've got to sign off every year, I think, to Welsh Government, and we don't know what that's going to look like. How do we prioritise the work? Because, I'll say it as it is always, and we always say we want a big happy family in the WLJ, and regionally we're all leaders together, but let's be honest about it. We care about Carmarthen for Darren and John down there in Pembroke, you in Swansea, which rail is probably more significant to you potentially. I just wondered how the fairness of the smaller pot, while we keep lobbying. I agree, we've got to lobby and we've got to hammer Welsh and UK governments, but I just wondered how we going to get to a point where we have a fair distribution of funding for the region and ourselves, pretty much. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Steve. Before I bring Stuart and Lee back in, I just refer back, obviously, as leaders and chief execs and partners, we went through a prioritisation exercise some time ago, and that has informed, I think, the work that the officers have done. So I think we have the principle, Steve, that somebody gets everything out of the money that comes into the region, and that we do try and have an equitable process for making sure we prioritise. Obviously, there are some things that are, I guess, more impactful than others, and that is always a determination in terms of how it impacts residents and communities. But we have, as you say, as a family, as a region, try to make sure that everybody's getting something out of it, and that we have a scheme of prioritisation that we've all corralled around, and I think that has been the basis of the work that the guys have done in terms of pulling this list together. We'd love to have, as everybody would, I'm sure, more cash to do more, but hopefully we will come out with something that's sensible and that everybody gets something out of. But I don't know whether Stuart and Lee want to add to that.
Yeah, I'll just briefly on that. It's no doubt it's absolutely understandable that each of the authorities, the representatives are there to represent the individual authorities, and then working as a region is for the wider benefit. As the chair said, we've gone through a prioritisation process. We have shortlisted things down. I'm sure there'll be discussions in terms of how we get down to how the allocation happens. I think when we look at year one programme, there'll be some things which, schemes which are underway, and things like the Milford Haven Transport Interchange, which are park constructed, so they'll automatically be funded, and a number of others, and then there'll be some core funding allocation to the authorities to develop the schemes and programmes ahead. And there may well be times where we have to sort of agree and sort of discuss things and say, well, how we get. It's not necessarily about an equal spread of funding. It's about a fair allocation of spending and trying to target those things which make a strategic difference. I'm not going to pretend this is a transformational amount of funding, and obviously things like the rail network and trunk road are outside it, but it is certainly funding which can make a difference to lives in the communities. So it's how we get our heads together and get that done. I know that's something that we're all keen to do. I'm sure from a political side you'll be very much keen to be involved, and I know Welsh Government and Transport for Wales are wanting us to sort of crack on and get those that sort of into a list for year one delivery, and then onto an iterative list for future years as well. So I'm sure there'll be some discussions in there, but hopefully we can get to a good point with it. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Stuart. Any other comments, questions from colleagues? Mark?
Yeah, just to endorse your statement earlier, Rob, that we had a great presentation from Lee to the Private Sector Advisory Board earlier in the week, endorsed the development of the plan, and actually was recognised as a group that actually the transport is a interconnecting point, and if we're going to develop and stimulate economic growth, that transport is absolutely crucial, and the growth of that transport network is going to be a key connecting theme going forward. So we're keen to support the work and to continue that lobbying process as well as you described it.
Great, thank you, Mark. Appreciate that. Okay, if there aren't any other hands up, then just to recap, you've got 4 recommendations which are on page 37 of the report. Just to clarify, recommendations 1, 3 and 4 are merely for noting purposes, but recommendation 2 is the one there that's to approve the final regional transport plan and the supporting documents to be submitted to Welsh Government. So can I ask leaders if they are happy to, well, first of all, I'll move the report formally. Can I ask for a seconder, please? Thank you, Darren. And then if I could ask leader colleagues, are you happy to note recommendations 1, 3 and 4 and agree recommendation 2 or approve recommendation 2? Okay, thank you. That is carried. Thank you, colleagues. Thank you for that, both, and again, take our thanks back for the work that's been done by you and your teams. So really appreciate it. On then to item 8, which is the Swansea Bay City Deal future of the Programme Portfolio Management Office, and that's on pages 49 to 76. I'll go over to Craig on this item, please.
Great, thank you, Chair. So members will be aware of some previous reports that we've brought now to the CJC that there's a work programme ongoing within our City Deal programme to look at the future work programme of the Programme Portfolio Management Office and whether there are different ways now ultimately we can align the work programmes of the City Deal with the CJC itself as a way of trying to sustain both services ultimately going forward. So the City Deal Programme Board is due to consider a report today of a review that has recently been commissioned, and a copy of that review was included with the papers that members will have seen today. Given that there is specific reference in there to the CJC and whether the CJC may absorb some potential work programmes of the City Deal in respect to some of the decision-making functions, I just wanted to ensure that members today were cited on what the City Deal Programme Board is going to be asked to consider in due course. If the City Deal itself does decide to pursue one of the options identified in that report, option 3, for example, being one of the main ones, there will be some corresponding impacts back to the CJC, which I'll bring to a future report to this forum so you could see the impact ultimately that it would have. But I was just thought it important in light of the decision-making process the City Deal is going to follow, that the CJC members will be aware of a direction of travel where we may end up, but anything specific will be subject to a more specific report now, probably in September in our next meeting, Chair.
Thank you, Craig. That's really clear. So again, if you've got any questions or comments for Craig on this item, I know many of the members of this board will also be members of the Swansea Bay City region, so they will have seen the relevant reports as well there. But happy to take any questions, comments if you have them. If not, this one's for noting. So again, can I just ask leader colleagues if they are happy to note? Okay, thank you very much. We'll go on to the forward work programme, which is pages 77 to 80. And the forward work programme is attached to your agendas for noting. Anything anybody wants to raise on this, or Craig, is there anything you wanted to outline on this one?
Nothing specifically, Chair. As we conclude this meeting, we will move into a forward work programme discussion, and obviously whatever comes out of that will be programmed then onto a future forward work programme. So we'll pick that up now in future meetings.
Okay, fantastic. Okay, so if there isn't anything, we're all happy to note that, yes? All happy, thank you. And then urgent items, I've not been advised of any urgent items, but we'll take them if there are any.
No urgent items, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. So with that, colleagues, that brings us to the end of the formal agenda. Thank you again for your attendance.